All right, welcome back everybody. Today and for the next couple days, we are going to continue to add pieces and details onto our clay coat of arms. So yesterday we should have finished up with the shape. We might have gotten to making the really thin coils in order to divide this section up, but today we want to work on sculpting those symbols that we are going to put on here. So for that, we do want our clay coat of arms, but it might be off to the side. I do have some more clay to form the symbols themselves. I still have slip and a skewer, and I do have a rolling pin that I might use later to show you a fun detail that you can include if you want to. So when you're working on your clay coat of arms, we want to include relief elements, things that come up off of the clay. We don't just want to paint all of our symbols on here. So I would recommend putting a symbol into each of the spaces that you have on there. And for that, yes, one of the challenges is having to work a little bit smaller. You will want to take clay and you will want to form each of the different symbols that you have in order to slip and score them on here. While you do have the option of using a skewer or one of the other wooden clay tools in order to carve details on here, I do think that forming them out of clay and adding them onto the surface is going to be easier and neater and will also look much more interesting. But feel free to carve maybe onto the relief elements or some details here if you need to. So I'm going to go ahead and get my relief elements formed, and then we'll check back in a second to remind ourselves of why it's so important to slip and score everything. Okay, might have gone overboard on the detail, but that's okay. All right, so I did change a couple of my symbols from what I had in my sketch, so bear with me. The top one I kept the pencil. Obviously most of the details there will be glazed on. Right here I have the leaf for nature, for hiking, for all that good stuff. Down here I decided to do a spool of thread and a needle because I love sewing. And then down here is a tiny little bowl of spaghetti. I know it looks like a bird's nest, but I really think glazing is going to help with that. All right, so guys, you might have seen I was doing some slipping and scoring while I was building these in order to make sure that all of my pieces stayed together. Something that I cannot emphasize enough, every single time you put two pieces of clay together, you need to make sure that you score and that you slip. If you do not do these things, there is a very good chance that your piece will break when it is in the kiln, or that something will fall off while you are trying to glaze it, and goodness knows we do not want that to happen. So I am very carefully going to score and slip each of my pieces on here, making sure that they are as secure as I can make them, and making sure that I have smoothed it out and made those joinings as neat as possible. All right, so I have scored and slipped everything. A little bit of advice: if you have something that's very small, very detailed, for example, like when I was working over here, you do still want to slip and score it as much as you are able to. Something that you can do if something is incredibly small and it's just hard to get the score marks on there and it's hard to get the slip on there, use the tools that you have at your disposal. So for example, for the needle, I dipped the skewer into the slip and then drew the score marks on it. So that way I was doing like both at the same time. And then also, you know, this is much smaller than adding slip with my finger. So I found that to be very helpful. Again, use the tools that you have. All right, so guys, the last thing that I'm going to show you how to actually do is if you would like to include one of the banners on like the top or the bottom of your coat of arms. This is optional, but this is something that I understand many students like to be able to do. If you are doing that, you will have to grab one of the rolling pins. Since this is small and thin, you will want to grab a paper towel or a piece of canvas, and we are going to roll out a thin piece of clay, thinner than the coat of arms, because we will need to kind of sculpt it to it. So again, you want to use a paper towel or a piece of canvas so that you can peel it off, or you can peel the paper towel back from it. All right, this should be big enough for what I need it to be. And yes, I have some creases in here, but that is not a problem. So give yourself a visual. How big do you want it to be? And then using the skewer, we're just going to draw out. Let me show you guys also really quick. This is relatively thin. All right, so make sure that you're rolling it out pretty thin. And then we will draw out exactly what we want it to look like. Again, I would recommend kind of sketching it out first before you actually cut it. All right, so I have it kind of coming down a little bit with the tapered banner on the end. And again, if you're cutting it out, use the point so that it is completely upright. Oops, that's fine, we'll fix it. Clay, luckily, is very easy to fix in that way. And again, I would recommend pulling the extra off instead of trying to dig your piece out. This is gonna drive me nuts. Let's try and get that. Well, might have made it worse. That's okay. I'll see if I can fix it. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and smooth this out, and then we'll talk about attaching it. All right, so I did a little bit more trimming and I sized it out. So I have this little tiny piece that kind of goes behind the coat of arms to make sure that I have something to attach it to and that I will have enough room to write the name that I want to be on there. So let's get this attached. You do have to be really careful when you're attaching this one, obviously, just because you have all that work on the front that we want to make sure we're not smushing. All right, gonna set that down. I think this is a really important place to really make sure that you are smoothing out those seams so that we do not see the line between the two separate pieces. And then again, super carefully going to flip that over, going to just use my finger in order to make sure that those two pieces are basically completely united in order to form one. All right, you do have the possibility, if you want it, the clay is strong enough, kind of turn those edges up a little bit, make it look very banner-like. I like that. You don't have to, that's okay. All right, so guys, very last thing before we make sure our names are on here, if you would like to have the option of being able to string some wire through this in order to hang it, you wanna make sure that you put some holes into this before you allow it to dry. I am going to recommend doing 2 holes, one on either side of the center. You want to make sure, mark them first to make sure that you're doing them correctly, and then you do want to really carefully lift it all the way up and sink the bamboo skewer all the way through to the back to make sure that you are going to have a clean hole to string the wire through. I recommend flipping it carefully to the back just making sure that it's clean enough on the other side, just so the wire will go completely through. Clear the extra away. All right, and then also I want to make sure that I know which project belongs to who. You can use the skewer, you can write your name, you can write your initials on the back. I, for obvious reasons, am just going to write Stuve. All right, and then you are all done. These projects will be fired. Will dry completely, be fired, and then we will be able to glaze them. Enjoy working on these, everybody.